is huge. I mean, it's like a man. It's big.
Kane's son.
You still don't understand what you're dealing with, do you? Perfect organism.
Just tell me one thing, Burke. You're going out there to destroy them, right? Not to study, not to bring back, but to wipe them out.
That's the plan. You have my word on it.
All right, I'm in.
Let's run!
Don't look back, dude! Run as fast as you can!
Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair.
Welcome to Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Prater, and I'm joined by my co-hosts,
Christian Matska,
Andy Good Girl.
Perry Chicos.
Welcome to the show, guys.
Hi.
Hey. Hello.
So today's show, whatever time of day you're listening to the show, is a special show. We've talked about this probably for the last 6 months when our friend Derek from Alien Theory was on before, and we had discussed via email, and I think on our last show with you, about coming on to defend Prometheus. And so we felt like it was the right time to do that. So welcome to the show, Derek. Thank you so much for coming on.
It feels so good to be back. Thank you for having me.
And I know that there's been some chatter in terms of social media when we announced this show, like, oh, people excited to hear from you. Obviously, you have a very large channel on YouTube. Everyone go check it out. It's Alien Theory. I'm sure most of you know about it already. I know all of us here are aware of that and watch it and or listen to it. But again, we are here to discuss/defend Prometheus. And we've had other shows before, like, so in 2007, way before the show. In 2017, I had Patrick on to defend Alien Covenant. It was the first episode with Patrick, and that opened the door for him to come on as a full-time co-host of the show. And we've had defending Alien 3, or In Defense of Alien 3, which was a series that we produced probably about 3 years ago now, maybe a little bit longer. I'm not really sure. But we haven't really touched on Prometheus in terms of, we've done a series on Prometheus. Obviously, again, there's a lot of controversy around it. There's a lot of criticism for it. And there's a lot of love for it too. And we are here to kind of talk about what that's about. So I want to give the floor to you, Derek. And again, Prometheus released in 2012. I saw it in theaters, as I know all of you did, to very mixed reaction myself. But before we get into the mixed reaction, I'm curious about your journey with this film, Derek.
Am I interrupting? Thought you might be running low.
Pour yourself a glass, pal.
Thank you, but I'm afraid it would be wasted on me.
You think we wasted our time coming here, don't you?
Your question depends on me understanding what you hope to achieve by coming here.
What we hope to achieve was to meet our makers, to get answers. Why they even made us in the first place.
Why do you think your people made me?
We made you because we could.
Can you imagine how disappointing it would be for you to hear the same thing from your creator?
Well, do you think a time will ever come when there needs to be a defense of Alien and aliens? Or you say from that episode? At least for the time being.
No, I don't think we'll ever need to defend.
Okay. Well, numbers are against us with the series, I guess. But when it comes to the Alien series, like when you're a fan, I guess you can see the movies objectively as they are, as films as they are. But there's always going to be a little bit of autobiography to it, I think. Who amongst us doesn't remember when we first saw Alien or Aliens, and the great memories those were, and maybe the other sequels not so much. But with Prometheus, for me, it was a very kind of intense thing, and I think I went into it last time on the podcast where I had reached a point where I felt that the series was pretty much done, or at least I felt done with it, because we had the original four, seemed that was a done deal. We weren't going to see a 5 for a while. Then Alien versus Predator, we had the 2 films there. Requiem, extremely disappointing, kind of reverting back to the B-movie roots of the series without the gloss, without any of the craft behind it. Very disappointing. And so we had these, I guess, 5 long years where nothing was happening, but then the whispers of a prequel, though maybe not necessarily a prequel, because that's one thing to easily forget now that we are so far ahead now in the future of when Prometheus was released. It wasn't always clear that it was going to be a prequel. There were whispers about it. Scott had kind of teased that we'd recognize elements of alien DNA and things like that. But no one was 100% sure. And that's an interesting thing to me going into the movie, because, I mean, you go into something like, say, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, you know exactly what you're getting. You have certain expectations. You want to see what's happening before Anakin becomes Darth Vader and all that kind of stuff. With this Prometheus film, well, it's not branded Alien, that's for sure. It's not necessarily a prequel. It exists in the universe. And it's, in that sense, free to do its own thing and have its own MO, which was interesting to me, and not really revealing what the kind of connections were until actually seeing the movie itself. That was exciting to me. That was something where I felt they could kind of start fresh in a way with the series, kind of doing it as, say, reboot, remake, but not necessarily, but still having those alien elements that otherwise they would be accused of being an alien ripoff. But in this case, it is an alien branded film for all intents and purposes. And I saw the movie. I immediately loved it. I thought it was great. When you see a movie, you just kind of have that buzz of, really experiencing something great, and kind of walking out of it knowing I definitely had to see it again. And then seeing the reaction to it, which was kind of interesting, online, which maybe isn't quite what it is today, but still, you'd see a lot of vocal people pointing out certain misgivings of the movie. I kind of felt, maybe almost naively at the time, that, this is Ridley Scott. This is probably going to be something like Blade Runner, where in 10 years, people are going to really appreciate it for what it is. They're really going to recognize the genius of Ridley Scott behind this film. We are 10 years later now. It doesn't seem to be the case, which... I don't think that was ever the idea behind it. I think the idea was to make something that was intentionally going to be divisive. There was no way that they were going to appeal to every fan. But at the same time, appealing to, say, the normal moviegoers who have no idea this is connected to Alien, it kind of works that way. So you have your cake and eat it too. It's a completely different atmosphere to Alien. A different way it works with its characters. Almost feels like a different genre, only being science fiction and horror elements to it. So it is almost this non-alien, anti-alien alien movie, and that to me as a fan was very refreshing, and I'm sure it was refreshing for the filmmakers as well. And I think it's just such a unique film. It's something that we're probably never going to see again. We're never going to see the risks that this movie takes ever again in being a franchise type of movie. And I appreciate it as its own entity and the way it connects to the Alien movies. But I think it stands on its own, even discounting Alien Covenant extremely well. And I watched it last night. Just to get it fresh in my mind for this podcast, and I have to say I still love it. I think it's great. So those are my initial thoughts.
May I ask you something?
Please do.
How far would you go to get what you came all this way for? Your answers. What would you be willing to do?
Anything and everything.
I remember on Ain't It Cool News, back when that was a website, someone had a leaked photo of what I believe ended up being the Prometheus galley, and they'd zoomed in on a door in the background, saying, "Look, it's just like Ron Cobb's design for the door over here on the Nostromo." And people were arguing, no, it's not connected. It's not the same thing. But that was the world we were living in, of trying to understand, trying to piece together all these little breadcrumbs. It was a different world.
It really was. There was so much excitement happening for that film. I mean, again, Ridley Scott's return to sci-fi after how many years? 30 years, almost, something like that. I mean, you have the man, not just him, but certainly his vision, responsible for redefining the genre twice, with Alien and then with Blade Runner, coming back to the genre that he redefined. I mean, it was like the king returning. You know, it was one of the most exciting times in fandom I can ever remember. Way more exciting than the roll up to Covenant. But yeah, and I think it was, to your point, Derek, it was a very different experience. Some of that was because people didn't know, and there was some chatter happening from people like Damon Lindelof. Is it an alien film? Is it? No, I don't know. Is it connected? Some kind of circus act with words that was, in the end, probably a little bit frustrating for the fans. Like, just tell us what this is. And then obviously we find out. But I think, and I've said this many, many times, that roll up was amazing. And I saw the film 4 times in theaters, I believe, once in 3D. I remember getting that poster from the IMAX version that I wish I still had, but I do not. It was a really, really great time. And I'm curious, and anyone else can jump in, but my question for you, Derek, is what jumps out for you? What is it about this film that sits with you so well?
Well, it addresses kind of the universal questions of science fiction. It's not really something in the same vein as Alien, where it's the pursuit of a biological weapon. We have these characters in pursuit of what made us, who made mankind. I think that's a really daunting thing, and that you kind of have to do as seriously as possible, which I think the film does. And so when we kind of address that with, you know, the Wayland character, that makes it all the more interesting once he's kind of revealed, because it's not about profit at this point. You know, we always kind of have this idea of the mega companies. They're controlling the world, but they themselves, they can't control their own mortality. So that'd be kind of the end game, I think. So it kind of goes beyond the usual nefarious plots of these mega corporations, and it's an interesting thing to see. And it's just so different than what a science fiction horror film usually does. And I think a lot of that is credited to its characters. Again, it's something very, very different from the original Alien. Those characters we get to know, become engaged with through their actions alone as the situation unfolds. With Prometheus, they're very carefully written characters, which I appreciate. I mean, obviously we have Elizabeth Shaw, who is kind of the religious aspect, who believes in the creation and is kind of firm in her beliefs from beginning to end. Kind of have this whole journey of her past, as we see in her dream. You know, she had lost both her parents, and that question must have plagued her for her life. Well, where do we go? And if we want to know where we go, where do we come from? How do I find that out? And the repeated line, it's what I choose to believe, which David observes, which is very, you know, interesting when he sees in the dream. And she mentions it in waking life, and he gives that curious look, which I thought was great. And she herself, as we learn, she can't create life. You know, we learn in kind of the dialogue that she's a barren, I suppose, or whatever the case between her and her mate Holloway may be. But then there's this, you know, terrible, perverted betrayal of that, and finally hosting life. And it's this terrible, terrifying squid creature, which is, I don't know, this great irony. And watching the film for the first time, you do obviously get a sense that she's the main character. But what was really surprising to me at the time was how we revealed the David character to be kind of the second half to this story, where he has his own arc, and We see that he is bonded to the Wayland character, and in the last act of the film, when he kind of comes out of his own sleep with a few days of life left to live, we almost get this, I suppose, as much for a robot as we can, this like sense of giddiness from David, which is very interesting. This cocksuredness, he's walking up on the centerpiece of the engineers' cryopods, superior species, no doubt. I trust these will impress, and things like that. And how it is this kind of story of the king and his reign, and his son David, daughter Vickers, who resents him terribly, and his refusal to give up his empire, refusal to give up life, which is it's this, again, this universal thing. I think the characters are so well executed in this film. So the very premise of the movie is so fascinating to me, and the characters in which it's played out, I think, are very compelling.
Please tell me you can read them.
What are you doing, David?
I'm attempting to open the door.
Wait. We don't know what's on the other side.
Oops, sorry.
Derek, I would agree with you in many points, and I love to see your passion for Prometheus and all of the reasons that you talk about. Like, I can hear it in your voice how much you love it, which is really cool. Because I too really enjoyed this film, and like I said, for the same reasons you're bringing up. I mean, Scott gives us the engineers, right? Like, that's a huge piece of it, and just something that wasn't in the universe, right, until Prometheus, really, and just opens up just a whole nother, just casts a wider net of what there could be, which I feel, going back to the characters, right, and humans trying to find out what's beyond Earth, what's beyond our lives, where do we go, that Elizabeth Shaw sort of understanding and voyaging out into space to find that, right? We see the horror behind it, right? Like, Scott plays with this aspect of it's almost like the entire idea of when Dallas and the crew walk into the room with the space jockey, right? And you're you get hit with this sense of just immense vastness in this huge idea of hey, maybe we're dealing with something that's much larger than we are, right? And I feel like Prometheus always has that idea lingering in the back of your mind, which is just very curious to me, right? I'm always oh man, what are they about to discover that could be bad? They're thinking it's going to be could be good. Obviously they're risking their lives and going out to discover what the engineers, invited them to see, right? But there's always this aspect of not really truly or fully understanding what it is really that they were doing. Yeah, it's awesome that we kind of get that Scott shows us this cool idea of how life is created on Earth and where we maybe go after that, or what our purpose is, in a sense. But we still don't fully understand it until in that last act where it's just kind of horrifying, right? And I love the Peter Wayland aspect into the story, where we get this background into that man and his desire to want to live longer or live forever, or whatever maybe that was supposed to play out if the engineer wouldn't have killed him. But even the dialogue, as I'm sure many of our listeners know, researching the dialogue that was cut right between David and the engineer, and just diving deeper into what Scott was potentially trying to present with what the engineers had done in the past, and maybe where they've been, and their link to Christianity, right, in some sense of that. But that's just what you brought up, Derek, right there initially, is just such a cool element to, I mean, at least I do. I know I'm pro Prometheus here, but just a cool element to bring in to the alien just story in franchise that really, I guess whether you like it or not, like can kind of shape like then how we feel about the original films now. But if you look at it in certain ways, it can just present just a different understanding, and just like a larger net, like I had mentioned, like it just casts this wider, like what else is out there? What else were the engineers doing, sort of a thing, which is cool to me. I really like that.
Well, yeah, how cool is it though? How it is, yeah, it's this journey to find the origin of man, but that's not unrelated to kind of the purpose of the alien and the overall thing. We do kind of find that there is this common link between man and the alien, being the engineers and the pathogen. So we share this connection with the alien, which I never would have expected coming from a prequel. I mean, obviously, anyone going into it was going to have their own expectations of what exactly the jockey was, where they came from, and all that. And obviously revealed that to be the engineers, but I think that was a little extra something in whatever this genetic makeup DNA bastardization is. We and the alien kind of share it, like humans and the alien, I guess I should say. I think that's such a cool idea. And again, it's just something I never would have anticipated.
Yeah, I'm hearing the word idea a lot, and I think that's where I defend Prometheus the most, is the introduction of, or maybe the sort of expanding upon these large ideas, right? I think the original trilogy, especially the first one, it was about immediacy of what it means to be a human, right? Survival, and just being in that sort of sympathetic situation in our mind, that and I mean that in terms of like neurology, like your body just goes into sympathetic mode. Whereas I like this aspect of, what does it mean to be alive for the long term? What does it mean to want to stay alive forever? And not just for the next hour, right? Which is what that first film really was. What does it mean to be expendable, or to have meaning in my life, right? To not be expendable, but to live beyond. What do I leave behind? The whole idea of having an heir and carrying on legacy. That I admire about this film, I have to say. I like the ideas planted in here, and the questions asked, and the questions unanswered. I think that's my biggest takeaway of it, was pondering these ideas. And some of it, I thought the seeds were planted masterfully, and some, I thought the execution, or like the question maybe was asked and then forgotten, and then something was thrown in our way to kind of sidetrack us. But my takeaway is the sort of larger themes introduced. Do I think everything was executed perfectly? I do not, but I think that's my biggest defense, if you will, for it. I know alongside myself and Christian, we are not the biggest defenders of this. And I don't want to go into all the reasons why, but I do love those questions. And I have to say, my favorite thing, because Jamie, you asked about what was your initial takeaway? Love the opening sequence. I love it. That is what stayed with me when I left the theater, was those first however many minutes, the visual, the intrigue. I was so taken with that. I was like, where is this going? And that's what I took away when I left, was that beginning. And I had just wished I'd felt that way throughout.
Yannick, listen to me. Hold Lady, please. You have to stop it. We're not stopping anything, Shaw. We're going home. Yannick, if you don't stop it, it won't be your home to go back to.
On Alien Day of 1993, an episode of Star Trek Next Generation came out called The Chase, where humans, Romulans, Klingons, and Cardassians all race to find the common origin of all these sentient species. And what they find are these tall, bald, humanoid aliens who seeded the galaxy with their DNA so that they could propagate all over the place. I'm sitting there and they take the helmet off and it's a bald guy, just like in the opening. Like, yep, okay. This seems very familiar. And around that same time was when Fire in the Sky came out, which also had the idea the aliens wear a gigantic helmet and we find their helmets or their spacesuits. Yes, Prometheus asks some big questions, but sometimes what it's asking is kind of dumb, because so what? So a sci-fi film says, my God, aliens made us. Isn't that amazing? And I say, no, that's a very, very common theme throughout all of science fiction. And it gets into this pseudoscience that gets a little bit embarrassing, I feel, for the people involved. Are you gullible enough to think that humans are somehow created by aliens, but the dinosaurs that preceded us by hundreds of millions of years not created by aliens? What's the story there? But I came to praise, not to tear down Prometheus. So it is a gorgeous film. And Jamie, I think that you made this point. We're never going to see another film like this, in part because they gave such a gigantic budget to Ridley Scott to do this comeback to science fiction, and he put it all on screen. When you watch that 4-hour-long documentary that Charlie de Lauzirika made, and you see the vehicles that they built and the layers of costuming and all this wonderful detail, it is all up there and it's gorgeous, and it probably will never happen again.
Like Andy, I think that there are some amazing ideas in Prometheus. In fact, and I've said this before on our show, various shows, when I saw it the first time I came home, I could not stop thinking about it for days. I could not stop thinking about it. I couldn't get it out of my head. My then partner, Dennis, he was the same way. He was like, oh my God. He's like, I just can't stop thinking about this movie. And I was like, what is up? Like, why can't I stop thinking? Like, the seeds, for lack of better terms, were planted. And I thought the ideas were great. I loved the idea of the engineer. I thought the engineers were scary. They were as scary as the xenomorph in a different way, because it's more like us, but we look in their eyes and we can't tell what we're seeing. Even though they have eyes, unlike the xenomorph, we still don't know what we're like. We can, as humans, we can, walk into some space with other humans and kind of get a sense of the room. We can read the room. We can read other people to some degree. Whereas with the engineers, there's nothing like that happening. These things are 9 feet tall. You don't know what they want. They can tear you limb from limb. That's terrifying. And I've not seen anything else presented in a film that's terrifying, except for the creature in The Boogeyman, which Perry and I are going to discuss in an episode after this for Patreon. But so I love the ideas, and I also thought Prometheus was the most beautiful film Ridley Scott has made visually since Alien, to be quite honest. Like, it is absolutely beautiful. And I remember seeing those first stills, and it felt like Alien, and I just was like, oh my God, like I could not wait. Again, father of sci-fi, coming home. Life can't get better than that. This is a defensive Prometheus episode, and I'm not here to tear it down, but I am here to push back for sure. And I think discussing, like, I don't want to get too granular or too like this and this little thing here bugged me and this is stupid, and I don't want to get bogged down with that kind of thing. But I also feel like that for me, sci-fi, it works the best when I don't know. Sci-fi works the best when they're asking questions, not answering them. And when I think my issue with Prometheus was that this was Ridley Scott. Oh yeah, this guy's in the chair. I don't need to know who's in that chair. I don't need to know who's in that chair. That space jockey works better without me knowing what's in that chair. That is a mountain I will never climb. I do not believe that what I'm seeing in Prometheus is what is in the chair in Alien. I just don't believe it. I don't buy it, and I won't. I refuse to. Now that's just me. Alien is a better film because they walk into a ship and we don't know what kind of ship it is. And I think my issue with Prometheus has been in big picture terms is I don't need these questions answered. Nobody asked you to answer these questions. And at the same time, Ridley Scott doesn't owe me anything. He he's a big director. He can do what he wants to do. I would argue that Alien isn't really his. I think it's as much Dan O'Bannon and Ron Shusett as it is his. He decided, okay, I'm going to approach this. He's going to try to answer a question that no one asked him to answer. And I think it demystifies Alien a little bit. And that's, again, big picture, some of my issue with the film. And some of these things that we're going to discuss are going to be subjective. Perry's going to like something for whatever reason that I won't like. And it's going to be the same with me, or I'm not going to like something for whatever reason. And there is no way in any universe that anyone's going to convince me that the characters in Prometheus are believable. There's just no way. Now, that being said, the Shaw that is in the last 20 minutes of the film, I love. She's lost everything. You can feel it. You can feel it in her, you can hear it in her voice. You can see it in her body. Her character becomes more interesting when she's not as perfect as she was in the first 2/3 of the film, where it's that it's what I choose to believe, which to me, that quote is just it's never resonated well with me. And I think the issue is, and Derek, you stated this well, is expectation. We bring in expectation, and when we experience letdown, and it's usually because our expectations aren't being met. And I think it was going to be almost impossible for Ridley Scott to come back to Alien and tell a story where we're not bringing in the glamour and the glory and the masterpiece that is Alien, and not expect the same thing. Especially after Blade Runner, how do you not bring that into a film like this? And then you see a film that's way more obvious than both of those films, whereas Alien and Blade Runner really played in mystery. You don't know a lot in those movies, and it's okay because you're immersed in this world. But with Prometheus, it became this, then this is this, and then this, and then this, and it's well, where's the mystery here? If you're answering all the questions, why am I watching this? So I don't want to belabor this too much, but that's my pushback a little bit. And that's, I've said this many, many times, I will watch Prometheus with the sound off. I think it's just beautiful. And there are moments in it that rival sci-fi films. To keep this show honest, I have to at least tell you how I'm feeling.
In defense of Prometheus, it's interesting what you said, Jamie, because I totally get your point. Yes, is it demystifying some of the things that Alien presented to us? Yeah, totally. I mean, if you want to look at it that way and choose to believe those things that Prometheus might be insinuating about what the space jockey is and things like that, you could totally do that. I actually love to hold on to the mystery of the space jockey as well. And as much as I love Prometheus, I also think the space jockey is something different. Not saying that it might not be an engineer, but it could be a different race. It could be, we just don't truly know. And what I enjoy about Prometheus is Scott doesn't exactly answer that, because there's so much more out there. I mean, they go to that planet. There's more domed buildings that you see in the background. There's we just don't truly know the story of what crashed on LV-426 and how the eggs even came to be, right? Within the cargo of that ship and all that stuff too, right? So I love to hold on to that. And that could totally personally be me just holding on to my childhood nostalgic brain and understanding of when I first watched those films. But I love it that way. That's what makes it more fun for me to enjoy that. But now I'm going to pivot, Christian, to what you said about the Star Trek side of it, right? And yes, is this maybe not the first time that something like this has maybe been presented in a sci-fi story to an audience like this, right? My defense, and I haven't seen every sci-fi film or TV show, so I'm only speaking from what I know. But like Star Trek is coming at us in this, has created this environment where these characters are like already dealing with other species in space. It's like Star Wars too, right? It's like if Luke Skywalker and the gang were like, hey, let's go find where we all came from, sort of thing. You'd be like, oh yeah, cool, okay. It's like galaxy fighters and lasers and they got cool spaceships and stuff like that. But Prometheus is like so much more like Alien, to where it's Andy, kind of to what you were saying a little bit, is it's just it's more cerebral and it's just more real in the aspect of like I'm looking at these characters, I see myself in them. They haven't, like, there's this sense of like haven't explored space that much yet, so there's this discovery aspect. They're out to truly find what that is, and so there's this level, or this I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but it feels new, or it felt like to me something that I hadn't seen exactly before. But I totally get what you're saying, Christian, too, right? Like, I mean, and Scott's obviously a lot older than me, so like he's lived through that and could be grasping from a lot of different things to pull into what he's trying to build too, right? And my last point I was gonna say is Prometheus could be, I mean, there's two different kinds of like sci-fi, right? Like Scott, obviously we know we're like in the sci-fi horror genre. One thing, and Derek, I kind of was thinking about this when you were speaking earlier, was just you think about Contact, right? Jodie Foster, her dad dies, like she's desperately like following in his footsteps, kind of, to like, and then wants to, it's just so sweet at the end where she gets to like kind of find out like where he went after he passed away, sort of a thing. And that like love transcends all this time and space, right? That's very much like a Prometheus somewhat aspect or film in comparison a little bit. I know I might be going down a crazy train route here, but it's just like there's that's very realistic as well, but more of like a happy ending, really lovey sort of storyline, right? Where I feel like Prometheus, Scott is taking us down like this bigger than us sort of idea, and like how horrifying it could be if it like all goes wrong or you just don't handle it properly. And that idea, I feel like, is presented in each character that he shows us, to where it's like Shaw, David, even Wayland, like thinking he's going to be able to find eternal life like by meeting these engineers, and in fact it just fast tracks him more to death or quicker to death, and that's scary, right? Like that's horrifying, and so yeah, so that's just to defending what you guys had said a little bit. That's just what it reminded me. And again, I know I'm speaking from my own experience and what I've consumed. But again, it's just like why I really enjoy that film so much.
Dan O'Bannon has that great quote, I didn't steal from anything. I stole from everything. Which, I mean, I guess you could apply to Prometheus too. Definitely tried and true ideas there. And that's great. It's just that it believes in them and is serious about them. And I like that. And our characters do. The characters believe in them. Our characters have desires. They have their own goals kind of intersecting each other, conflicting with each other a little bit, which all plays out great. And yeah, obviously to touch on all that we've been talking about, visually, it's just a breathtaking movie. It really is. And I think, what you can also say about a lot of movies from a visual standpoint is that if you can watch it with the sound off, if you can kind of get a sense of what's going on, then that's a good sign of visual communicating in a story. And you kind of almost do, even if you are watching with the sound off. I'm kind of recalling that scene where they're in the tunnels and they see the playback of the engineers running, and you're seeing this story and you're kind of engaging with it, like, oh, what happened here? So I think that's very, very interesting. And I just think that, with the whole expectation angle as well. Yeah, it's the irony of all prequels, it seems. It's like we think we want to know what happens before ... But I mean, has there ever really been a prequel where everyone can say, yeah, that really tied in well? I don't necessarily think so. Yeah,
Rogue One.
Rogue One, okay. I don't have a clear memory of that one. Just like the terrible CGI Carrie Fisher.
Yes, agreed.
And, sure. I mean, you can take a look at certain ones, and that's okay. I guess that would be fair enough. But what I like about Prometheus is that I didn't expect any of what we saw. I mean, we can see in some of the other media of Alien. They had tried to address that before with the space jockeys, with the aliens. We've seen some of the Earth War storyline, the apocalypse, the falling angels, was it, or the destroying angels? We've seen it from those angles, and that's kind of interesting stuff too. But is it really just a matter of seeing this big giant creature come to life, and then what do you do with it exactly? So I do like how the whole thing goes off on its own trajectory, its own ideas. So I'm always going to praise it for that and defend it for that, just because it not only wasn't really what I was expecting myself from a personal fan point of view of what happened before ... Which one, it leaves a gigantic gap worth maybe 5 more sequels that Scott had originally planned to do. But it's just something that I would never even considered, which I like that. I like being surprised as an audience member, rather than getting the satisfaction of being somewhat of what I expected, somewhat of what I wanted, just kind of taken off guard a little bit and kind of having to force myself to take on this new concept. And of course, there's all the other concepts that borrowed from here and there, the great tried and true sci-fi of it all, the true believer sci-fi approach of Ridley Scott, but never really applied to Alien, within the Alien universe. And I think all of those ideas fit together in a surprising way, and a way that at least satisfies me. And we can say this is a defense of Prometheus, and of course within the fan circles there's always going to be the divisiveness. But I mean, I think generally the movie was well received from those who maybe didn't even know it was an Alien movie, maybe from those who did. Had fairly good reviews, did very well at the box office, as far as I know. I mean, we're still talking about it. A lot of people are still talking about it to this day, so there has to be some highlight to that. I mean, here we are, 11 years later now. Is Prometheus good or bad? We all haven't decided yet.
But I also don't think that those binary terms, good or bad, I think that those can work against whatever you're talking about. I think the world that we live in isn't binary. It can be gray. It can be good and bad. It can be a mix of all sorts of things. I said about Prometheus, even though I wasn't a big fan, but months later, I said there's a masterpiece of a film in this movie, and I'm still convinced of that. There's something really great about this film, and I think what's happened is Prometheus came out 10 years ago, but also it came out in a time where technology has gone really far in terms of CGI, in terms of, so you have Star Trek and X-Files and all of these things that were happening that were in the social zeitgeist. So by the time Prometheus came out, a lot of the things we've seen before, to Christian's point, one of those things being the black goo, which the X-Files did on TV. And the X-Files also stole from Alien, because, you had the alien creatures gestating inside of a host and then breaking out. But before they did that, there was the black goo. That was their method of transportation, essentially. And so by the time Prometheus did, it was like, y'all couldn't come up with anything better than this. That's not to say, though, but to an earlier point, ideas are recycled all the time. It's just how you recycle them. to Dan O'Bannon's point, I mean, even George Lucas, everyone has stolen from other people, or lifted, maybe not stolen, it's probably a harsh term, but everyone's been inspired by other stories. As a writer myself, I'm inspired by tons of things that end up in the stories that I write, of course. And I think, but in the medium of film and sci-fi, because there's been films like Sunshine, and I mean, many, what's that one film by Paul A. Anderson, where they go to the ship and the ship's like haunted?
Event Horizon,
which also riffs off of Alien as well. And there's The Descent, which is a great film. Then there's The Descent 2. So all of these films are preceding Prometheus. And so by the time, again, Prometheus releases, we've seen a lot of that stuff. And so what was impactful about Alien was that we've never been immersed in a world like that before. But also, I've never seen a film like Alien again. Alien is, for me, what 2001 is like for sci-fi. Just kind of in like Alien for me is a sci-fi horror genre. Like it redefined that genre the way 2001 did. There's been no other film like Alien. And I think part of what I missed about Prometheus, and when you're talking about the fan base, and we've had these discussions between us before, fans are fickle. Fans don't know what they want. Fans think that they know, but then they want something new, but not too new, but old, but new. But I want to see this character, but I want to make sure that they're new characters too. And I really want to hear that line, but why am I hearing that line? I've already heard that line before. So fans are fickle. Making a film or writing a story to please fans is the wrong way to go. For sure. I think you need to be true to yourself. You need to be true to yourself as an artist. But I also think it's a hard thing. I think prequels are already fraught with so much. Prequels are dangerous. And it's not to say that you shouldn't do them because they're dangerous. They're just dangerous. And then you get all of these different reactions, people who love it, people who hate it. And then within those circles, if you don't love it the way someone else loves it, it's some type of like insult against you or against them because you don't love it. And I think we've been able to create a space here in Perfect Organism where we can talk about things that we love. Christian doesn't, and Andy both don't love Alien 3 the way Patrick and I and Perry does, but we've been able to have those discussions and hear all sides of it and say, you know what, there is merit to your opinions, Christian, Andy, and come to this place. And I think with Prometheus, for me, I have not been able to get to that spot, even though there are things that I love. And I even recording this right now, I'm thinking, oh my God, what are people going to say about like things that I am saying, like, oh, Jamie's criticizing this, because it's been so volatile. People are so volatile that if you criticize something that they love, they take offense to it. But I think we should be able to, and I love this series so much. If you passionately love something, you should also be able to passionately criticize it from that love, which is, I love Star Wars and I passionately criticize Star Wars all the time. I think that this discussion is really, really, really important. And hopefully the people who are listening who love Prometheus can also come to a place where they're like, you know what? Yes, we love it, but we can also see where other people are coming from.
Speaking of Star Wars, in the very first episode of Ahsoka, streaming now on Disney Plus, there's a moment where a character picks up this orb that is a map to another galaxy, and there is a full-on quote of the Prometheus, the theme that sounds like Star Trek. You know, the one that I mean, that later on David has to play on his little flute in Covenant, and I couldn't believe it. So 11 years later, you know, someone felt the need to reference Prometheus in that moment. Thanks to Facebook, I was able to look back at opinions that I had shared just after seeing the film 11 years ago, and they were very positive. With the one note, I was fully convinced that Ridley Scott intended to release a longer director's cut of this movie. And so with all of my praise and saying I really enjoyed this, but I kept saying, and I can't wait to see the true full director's cut when he puts it all together. And when that didn't come out, and instead we get a Blu-ray with a whole bunch of extras, and every single extra scene that had been cut was better, was an improvement, you know? And so fans have made edits where they've put all of that material back in. And so on the very rare occasion, I've only seen Prometheus three times maybe in my life. I watch once in the theater. I watched the extended cut where all of those deleted scenes and the TED Talk and all that are integrated back in, and it is a much better film. He gives motivation to characters who otherwise are really lacking it. Why would you cut out the extra engineers in that opening scene, the scene that Andy loved so much? There are old engineers there, and it creates a sense of community, and it elevates the ritual of it. But for the runtime, he cut it, and I don't know. I'm here to praise. So when I do want to watch Prometheus, the extended cut that takes everything that Ridley Scott filmed but didn't eventually deem screen worthy, put it all back in, and it is a much better film.
You're strong. Maybe you should help me now, okay? Get it off, man, okay? Come here, man. For God's sake. Oh my god. Oh my god. It's getting tighter. I ain't touching it. I don't want to touch it. Touch the thing, man. For God's sake, don't be... God, you're making it worse. It's tightening. It's breaking my arm. It's my arm. Cut it off. Cut it off. Cut it off. Cut it off. Cut it off.
I was going to say, when we talked about just the expectation, right, versus the reality, I mean, isn't that true for most things? Don't we love the question? And then when we truly dissect something to the point where we're no longer seeing it as a whole, we're disappointed, right? I didn't need to know what the space jockey was, like you said, because and especially after decades, we have told that story in our mind and filled it in our mind in 1,000 different ways, right? Millions of people have told our own story, whether we consciously were thinking about it or not. So when we do get a collective answer or sort of clues given, of course, everyone's going to be like, that's what it is. It's that, I think it's a no-win situation. Like you were saying, they're dangerous. It's a no-win situation. And you can like aspects of it, which I did. And there's good ideas in there. But I think it's hard to answer or try to answer questions that have been out there for decades, that part of the joy of Aliens, if you want to use that word, I know it's weird with that movie, but is discovery and thinking, like, what is that? And not knowing. That is one of the best things about, especially original, is not knowing and having your mind fill in the blanks. So when we have computers and certain characters questionably doing things that are filling in those blanks, sometimes it's hard to sort of, A, you're never going to please people, but B, there's that certain level where you're like, oh, that's it. It's just, I don't think you can get over that. And I think just having that mystery out there for 40 years or 30 years at the time, like, that sat well with me. I don't think I needed a prequel is what I'm saying. I loved the idea of it. But I think, like Jamie was saying, they're always dangerous. And I totally concur about Rogue One. I am a massive Rogue One stan. I agree with you on that. If it's done well,
Robert De Niro in Godfather 2 playing the young version, that is universally accepted as a really, really good prequel. So when they take the helmet off the severed head, if you could CGI in Robert De Niro, who pretty much already looks like an engineer, he could say some Taxi Driver lines. It'd be really good.
I think that leads me to maybe one of my final questions for you, Derek. How do you process, and you can answer this obviously in any way you want to, but when you hear the criticism or the people like, I have a hard time with this in Prometheus, and maybe you don't, I don't know, you haven't really discussed, and you don't need to, obviously you haven't really discussed maybe some things in the film that don't work, but when you hear the chorus coming from certain parts of the community of like, this movie doesn't work, how do you process that? You're like, oh, okay, that's weird, it works for me. What is that like for you?
You talking to me? Okay. Taxi Driver line. Yeah, another good one that I just thought of was Psycho 4 at the beginning. Anyone see that? That was all right. But well, before I address that, Jamie, going back to the joy of Alien, one thing, I mean, there are a million things that kind of gravitates me to Alien, but if I'm true with myself deep down, what really attracts me is the monster movie elements, a cool monster. And before everyone starts accusing us of waxing philosophical throughout this whole thing, I think Prometheus just kind of has it where it counts when it comes to cool, violent, gross, under your skin kind of monster movie moments, which are great. I mean, hey, well, I guess to go to Jamie's point about certain qualms people have with the movie, the whole petting the space snake thing, going all Steve Irwin on the little mutated vagina face kind of thing, very appropriate for the world of Alien, of course. Well, people will bring that up and say, hey, why is he doing that? Come on. Well, I don't know, but if it had just jumped up from behind them and the results were the same, would you still not like it? Is it just really that tiny thing, that tiny detail? The point is, it's really gruesome when it breaks his arm like that and crawls into his suit, and Fifield gets the acid on his face, and you see the helmet kind of just fusing to his face, which is great. And even with the Holloway getting sick, like seemingly with each shot, they add the more makeup. You see like pulsating veins in his neck, and that's great. And of course, the med pod scene, which is amazing. It really kind of rivals the chest burster scene of the original film in terms of just really shocking moments that I mean, I can say personally, going back to my own experience at the movie theater, seeing it for the first time, I think that might have been like the only time in a movie where I kind of just turned away a little bit and covered my eyes just for like a second, maybe because it was in 3D actually, but that was great, and the effects were great, and seeing the big mutated giant face hugger thing, which looks great. I mean, the effects are incredible in this film. I mean, I guess it's to date the last Alien film in the series, I guess, to be nominated for an Academy Award for its visual effects, which you always kind of associate with the movies. You always kind of associate that these are monster movies, whatever you want to call them, but made with the best, most up-to-date, groundbreaking visual effects, which Prometheus achieved, I think. So it absolutely nailed it in terms of visual effects. And when it comes to the other arguments, I mean, you hear a lot of the same things over and over again, sure, like with petting the space snake, and what else? I mean, a lot of them are kind of bad faith arguments. It's like, okay, he takes off his helmet, though he checks the readings. There's breathable air there. There's been terraforming, so he was right. So what's your point? I mean, I don't get it, especially, in a post-COVID world. I don't want to hear anyone being concerned about breathing in, possible virulence, okay? And maybe like the running from the juggernaut in a straight line. I don't know, if you watch it closely, you can kind of see like debris kind of just shooting down like meteors from the side part of the ship. So, I mean, maybe technically you would be a little bit safer running straight. I don't know. But I mean, they seem to be echoed throughout eternity, where you can repeat that same talking point, feel justified in believing it to be a valid criticism of the film, which, I mean, if it is to you, that's fine. I mean, you don't have to like the movie, obviously. None of us here, and most of the Alien fan base, I'd say, they're civil about it. Obviously, you're going to get people who are really, really hardcore name calling, whatever, as with any group of fans. But I mean, I would like to hear something different from people. Like, people always say, "Oh, the scientists are so stupid." Well, okay, what do you mean? Well, they take off their helmet. Okay, great. I don't know. It's not really a compelling argument to me. So there's going to be those arguments, which in some way I get. and in some ways just inevitable. Because I mean, another really kind of astonishing thing to me was not too long ago I was listening to the commentary track on the Blu-ray release of John Spates and Damon Lindelof, and regardless of what you think of Damon Lindelof, he recorded this before the movie was released, and he forecast to a T the exact arguments or exact complaints that people were going to have about the movie, and he provided his own justifications for them, which is fine. You can call out lazy writing, but whatever you see, whatever you deem to be lazy writing, there is kind of a reason, a justification behind it. But that was amazing to me. So he knew going into it. I mean, they all knew going into it that it was going to be this divisive movie. But I think what was the ultimate goal, which maybe wasn't in the goals for, say, Alien Covenant, was that it was something that was still, even as a prequel, was going to stand alone on its own. And it was going to have a wider appeal of sort of being an alien movie, but not being an alien movie, and working on its own terms. And I think it's successful in that. I really do.
I think that was a great conversation, honestly. I love talking about what doesn't work for me and also what does work for me. I love these kinds of conversations where not everyone's all on the same page, because it makes for it helps me learn more about the subject that we're talking about. But also, I don't like an echo chamber either. I like it when someone disagrees, and I like to hear why they disagree, so it helps me understand them a little bit more. I mean, I think this conversation, what I've been thinking about the most is actually Alien Romulus. There's been all this controversy around the prequels, and what we're about to get might be kind of like a sidequel film, perhaps. And there's this expectation of what we think of when we think of an alien film. Of course, this next alien film is called Alien Romulus, so it is an actual alien film. But I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know how it's going to feel. I don't know if it's going to feel a little bit more like Prometheus. Is it going to feel a little bit more like Alien? We know a few things here and there, but the proof is in the pudding. We'll know when we see it. And I know the things that I love the most about Alien are, and I'm not just talking about Alien, the first film, but in the first three films specifically, the silence, the atmosphere, the quiet, the patience it takes, how not obvious it is. And how we have to, as the audience, have to figure out what's going on. And there is quite a bit of that in Prometheus. I think that there are a lot of actually interesting questions that Ridley Scott and Damon Lindelof and John Spates presented in a very different way that is, to your point, Derek, refreshing and new. And it flips things on its head. And I think that was a bold move for them. And it was a move that perhaps didn't pay off. But we'll see. But I love this discussion. I love talking about things like this, and I feel like if the right people are listening, who knows if this will get back to the people behind Romulus or the people behind the next alien. There's an alien series on the way, someday. And I feel like these conversations will maybe just make those better. That being said, thank you for coming on the show, Derek. That was the fastest hour of my life. If anybody else has anything to say.
No, thank you for coming. I love hearing new perspectives. I love when people are passionate about something that I may not necessarily be, and then you plant a seed. We keep saying that. You plant an idea, and I go home I go to bed and I think about it. So you've given me a couple things to think about. Thank you.
I love that Prometheus has things you can dig into. Like, I love the bas relief of the alien. I love the glowing green stone. I love that in the painting that's disintegrating on the ceiling, there's another alien species shown that we don't know anything about. And you can buy the art book and you can look at it and you can think about it, and it's not just surface level. There is stuff there. It is very Lovecraftian. So yes, it's worth talking about Prometheus. We'll still be talking about Prometheus 10 years from now for sure. But thank you for coming on, Derek. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. Likewise, it's a pleasure to chat with you again, and love what you do on Alien Theory, man. I always share a lot of your stuff on our Instagram page, and obviously you probably see me like or comment on some things that you post, but yeah, man, I love it, and just love to keep fostering the alien community, and just having you on here as a guest is it's great to like share the love of what we love about Alien and the franchise together. So very cool.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Really, anytime you want me, please just let me know. I'll be on. This one in particular, I was very happy to do. Defending Prometheus. That's what we're here for. Well, I don't know. Does Prometheus need defending? I don't think so. I just think it needs a little understanding, a little love and care. Anyone listening, if you haven't seen Prometheus in a while, check it out again. Give it another chance. Let go your inhibitions and just enjoy this film.
Yes.
I mean, it makes me want to watch it again, to be honest with you.
Yeah, me too, actually.
So.
I feel like I need to go watch it again.
Yeah.
The longer cut, though. The longer cut.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's that cut called?
Totally.
The cut that,
it's called like the chaos cut. Or Derek, do you know what I'm talking about?
I've heard of it. I've never seen it myself, actually.
Oh my goodness!
I want to say White Dragon, but that's the Blade Runner thing.
Yeah.
Is it on YouTube, Christian?
No,
I was given it as a file.
Oh,
that's right. Because
okay.
you gave it to me. I have it somewhere on a hard drive.
Yeah. Or did I give you the Covenant version? Because the guy did both of the prequels.
Oh, I don't remember.
With all the extra stuff, and oh my gosh.
Yeah. I have to check that out.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We will be back again with another episode of Perfect Organism.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
It was great. Thank you very much.
Final report of the vessel Prometheus. The ship and her entire crew are gone. If you're receiving this transmission, make no attempt to come to its point of origin. There's only death here now, and I'm leaving it behind. It is New Year's Day, the year of our Lord, 2094. My name is Elizabeth Shaw, last survivor of the Prometheus. And I'm still searching.
For more on Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast, please visit perfectorganism.com. Perfect Organism is available for listen or download through Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn, and Spotify. If you'd like to support the show, please visit perfectorganism.com/support. Thank you.